The silence in my kitchen felt different that Tuesday morning. Not the comfortable quiet I'd grown accustomed to in the 3 years since Robert passed, but something heavier, more unsettling. I was arranging fresh daisies in the blue ceramic vase he'd given me for our 40th wedding anniversary when my phone buzzed against the marble countertop. "Hi, Mom. Just calling to check in," came my son David's familiar voice, though it sounded strained, almost forced. "Oh, honey, what a lovely surprise," I said, setting down the last flower. "How are you and Jessica doing? And little Emma?" We're fine, Mom. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about something." There was an edge to his voice that made my maternal instincts flare. David had always been my worrier, even as a child. Where his younger brother Michael charged headfirst into everything, David analyzed, planned, hesitated. But this wasn't his usual overthinking. This was something else entirely. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Nothing's wrong, exactly. It's just, well, Jessica and I have been talking and we think it might be time for you to consider other living arrangements." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Other living arrangements? David, what are you talking about? You're 72, Mom. Living alone in that big house. It's not safe anymore. We've found some really nice assisted living facilities. There's one called Sunset Manor that has excellent reviews, and another called Golden Years that Jessica toured last week. They have activities, medical staff on site, people your own age to socialize with." I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles going white. "David Alexander Maris, I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself. I've been living in this house for 45 years. Your father and I raised you boys here, and I have no intention of leaving. Mom, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. We're trying to do what's best for you." "What's best for me?" Or what's most convenient for you and Jessica? The question hung in the air like smoke. I could hear David's sharp intake of breath, and for a moment, I thought he might hang up. Instead, his voice came back softer, almost pleading. "Mom, that's not fair. We love you. We worry about you. What if you fall? What if there's an emergency? You're all alone there. I have my neighbors. I have Mrs. Patterson next door, and the Johnsons across the street have been wonderful since your father passed. I have my garden club, my book club, my volunteer work at the hospital. I have a life here, David." "But Mom..."
"No buts.
"This conversation is over. I'm staying in my home, and that's final." I heard him sigh, a sound so filled with frustration and something else. Was it resignation?
Defeat? Fuck a Mom.
"We'll talk about this later. I have to go anyway. I love you." "I love you too, honey." I was about to hang up when I heard it. Muffled voices in the background. David must have forgotten to end the call, and I could hear him talking to someone. Jessica, most likely. I should have hung up. I should have respected their privacy. But something in the tone of their conversation made me freeze, the phone still pressed to my ear. "She's being completely unreasonable," I heard David say, his voice clearer now, as if he'd moved closer to the phone. "She won't even consider it." "I told you this wouldn't work," came Jessica's voice, sharp with irritation. "Your mother is stubborn as a mule. We're going to have to force her hand." My blood ran cold. Force my hand? What did that mean? "How do you suggest we do that?" David asked, and I could hear the exhaustion in his voice. "Simple. We stop enabling her independence. No more grocery runs when she asks. No more helping with yard work or house repairs. Let her see how difficult it really is to live alone at her age." I felt as if I'd been slapped. Jessica wanted them to abandon me, to leave me struggling, so I'd have no choice but to give up my home. "I don't know, Jess. That seems cruel." "It's not cruel, it's practical. David, think about it. Once she's in assisted living, we can sell the house. Do you have any idea what that property is worth? It's sitting on 3 acres in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in town. We could easily get 800,000, maybe more. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. This wasn't about my safety or well-being. This was about money. My home, the place where I'd loved and laughed and cried and raised my children, was nothing more than a dollar sign to them. The money would solve a lot of our problems, David said quietly. Emma's college fund, the mortgage on the lake house, your mother's medical bills.
Exactly.
And it's not like we're stealing from her. She'd be well taken care of at Sunset Manor. They have bingo nights and craft classes. She'd probably be happier there anyway. Bingo nights and craft classes. As if that could replace a lifetime of memories, a garden I'd tended for decades, rooms where I could still feel Robert's presence. What if she finds out what we're doing? David asked. She won't. And even if she suspects something, what's she going to do? She needs us, David. She just doesn't realize it yet. Once she does, she'll be grateful we made this decision for her. I listened in horrified silence as they continued to plot my future, discussing me as if I were a problem to be solved rather than a human being with feelings and rights. They talked about which facility would be cheapest while still being nice enough that they wouldn't feel guilty. They debated whether to put my furniture in storage or just donate it all to charity. Most of it is outdated anyway, Jessica said dismissively. That old dining room set probably weighs a ton, and who wants floral wallpaper anymore? We could stage it better for selling if we just cleared everything out. That dining room set was where we'd eaten thousands of meals as a family, where David had done his homework while I cooked dinner, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and milestones. The floral wallpaper was something Robert and I had chosen together on our 20th anniversary, spending an entire weekend hanging it ourselves while the boys stayed at my mother's house. I still think we should talk to her one more time, David said, though he sounded like he was already giving in.
Fine.
But when she refuses again, and she will, we start the plan. No more help, no more checking in every day. Let her see what it's really like to be on her own. And if something happens to her, if she gets hurt because we weren't there to help. There was a pause, and when Jessica spoke again, her voice was cold as winter. Then that just proves our point, doesn't it? That she shouldn't have been living alone in the first place. The casual cruelty of that statement took my breath away. They were willing to let me suffer, possibly even get hurt, just to prove they were right. Just to get their hands on my home. I need to think about this, David said. Don't think too long. Emma starts high school next year, and we need that college fund started. Plus, your mother isn't getting any younger. The longer we wait, the more suspicious it'll look when we suddenly stop helping her. I heard footsteps, then a door closing. The background noise faded, and I realized David must have picked up his phone. For a terrifying moment, I thought he might realize the call was still connected, but then I heard the definitive click of the line going dead. I sat in my kitchen, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of the home I'd loved for nearly 5 decades, and felt more alone than I had since the day Robert died. My own son, the boy I'd nursed through pneumonia and cheered at every Little League game, was planning to manipulate me out of my home. And his wife, the woman I'd welcomed into our family with open arms, saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to their financial goals. The daisies I'd been arranging seemed to mock me with their cheerful yellow faces. I swept them into the trash with one angry motion, then immediately regretted it. Robert had always brought me daisies when he was trying to apologize for something. Simple flowers for a complex woman, he used to say, making me laugh despite whatever silly argument we'd been having. God, how I missed him. Robert would have known what to do. He would have marched over to David's house and had words with him. Strong words. Robert had never been one to back down from a fight, especially when it came to protecting his family. But Robert was gone, and I was on my own. Or was I? I sat there for a long time thinking. Jessica and David believed they held all the cards. They thought I was a helpless old woman who would crumble without their support. They were counting on my dependence, my gratitude, my love for them to make me compliant. They were wrong. I might be 72, but I wasn't dead yet. I had more fight in me than they realized. And if they wanted to play games with my life, well, two could play at that. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. Margaret Chin had been Robert's lawyer for 30 years, handling everything from our wills to the business contracts for his accounting firm. She was sharp as a tack and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when protecting her clients. Margaret? It's Bella of Maris. I need to see you as soon as possible. And Margaret? I need you to keep this completely confidential. Even from David. Especially from David. The next morning, I sat in Margaret's office, my hands folded in my lap as I recounted the conversation I'd overheard. Margaret listened without interruption, her dark eyes growing more serious with each detail. "This is quite troubling, Bella," she said when I finished. "What they're discussing could potentially be considered elder abuse, depending on how far they're willing to take it." "I don't want to press charges against my own son," I said quickly. "I just want to protect myself and my home." "I understand. Let's discuss your options." Margaret pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. "First, your house. It's currently in your name only, correct?" I nodded. "Robert left everything to me when he passed." "Good. That means David has no legal claim to it while you're alive. However, if something were to happen to you, what does your will currently say?" "The house goes to David and Michael equally, along with the rest of my estate." "We may want to reconsider that, given the circumstances. But let's table that for now. More immediately, we need to think about protecting you from their plan to isolate you." Margaret leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen against her lips. "Tell me about your daily routine. How dependent are you on David and Jessica for help?" I thought about it honestly. David comes by twice a week to check on me. He usually brings groceries when I ask, and he's helped with some maintenance issues around the house. Jessica. I paused, realizing how little Jessica actually contributed. Jessica mostly complains about things. The garden being overgrown, the house needing updates, that sort of thing. So, you're not actually dependent on them for survival? No, not at all. I drive myself to appointments, I do my own shopping most of the time, I manage my own finances. David helps because he wants to feel useful, not because I can't manage without him. Excellent. That gives us options. Margaret made more notes. Here's what I suggest. We're going to beat them at their own game, but we're going to do it legally and ethically. Over the next hour, Margaret outlined a plan that was both simple and brilliant. We would document everything, gathering evidence of David and Jessica's intentions. We would set up alternative support systems so that when they withdrew their help, I wouldn't actually need it. And most importantly, we would protect my assets in ways they couldn't anticipate. The key, Margaret explained, is to stay one step ahead of them while appearing to be the helpless victim they expect you to be. I left Margaret's office feeling more energized than I had in months. David and Jessica thought they were dealing with a weak old woman who would roll over at the first sign of hardship. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. That afternoon, I called my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. Alice Patterson was 68 and had lived next door for 15 years. She was a retired nurse with more energy than people half her age, and we'd become close friends since Robert's death. "Alice, I need to ask you a favor," I said when she answered. "And it's going to sound strange." "Honey, at my age, everything sounds strange. What do you need?" I explained the situation, leaving out some of the more painful details, but giving her enough to understand what was happening. Alice listened with growing indignation. "That little witch," she said when I finished, and I knew she was referring to Jessica. "I never liked her, you know. Too calculating. And David. Well, I'm disappointed, but not entirely surprised.
He's always been easily led.
Will you help me? Of course I will. What do you need? We spent the next hour working out the details. Alice would be my backup for grocery shopping and errands. Her grandson worked for a landscaping company and could handle any yard work I needed. Her son-in-law was a handyman who could take care of household repairs. Between Alice's connections and my own resources, I could create a support network that didn't include David and Jessica at all. But that was just the beginning. My next call was to Michael, my younger son who lived in Seattle with his wife Rachel and their twin boys. Michael and I had always been close, but I tried not to burden him with my problems since he lived so far away.
Mom.
This is a surprise. How are you doing? Michael's voice was warm and genuinely pleased to hear from me, such a contrast to David's strained politeness earlier. I felt a pang of guilt for not calling him more often. I'm doing well, sweetheart. I was wondering, do you have any vacation time coming up? I'd love to see you and the family. Actually, yes. Rachel and I were just talking about taking the boys somewhere for spring break. They'd love to see Grandma's garden. Is everything okay? You sound different. I hesitated. I didn't want to poison Michael against his brother, but I also needed to know where he stood. Can I ask you something, and will you give me an honest answer? Of course. Do you think I should be living in an assisted living facility? There was a pause, and I held my breath. God, no, Mom. Are you kidding? You're sharper than most people my age, and you're healthier than I am. Why would you ask that? The relief was overwhelming. David seems to think I can't take care of myself anymore. David worries too much. He always has. Remember when we were kids and he wouldn't let me climb the oak tree because he was convinced I'd fall and break my neck? Meanwhile, you were up there with me, showing me which branches were strong enough to hold us. I laughed despite myself. I'd forgotten about that. David means well, but he sees problems everywhere. You're fine, Mom. More than fine. And anyone who suggests otherwise doesn't know what they're talking about. We made plans for him to visit in 3 weeks, and I hung up feeling better than I had since this whole nightmare began. At least one of my sons still saw me as a capable human being. The next few days passed quietly. David called once to check in, his voice still carrying that forced cheerfulness that made my skin crawl. I was polite but distant, playing the role of the slightly confused elderly mother who might, just might, be starting to struggle with living alone. I had such a hard time opening that jar of pasta sauce yesterday, I told him, injecting just the right note of helplessness into my voice. My arthritis is acting up again. Oh no, Mom. Do you need me to come over and help with anything? Oh, I managed. Mrs. Patterson helped me out. I let that sink in for a moment. She's been so kind lately, offering to take me grocery shopping, checking in every day. I don't know what I'd do without neighbors like her. Could practically hear David's frown through the phone. This wasn't going according to their plan. I was supposed to be isolated, not making new connections. That's great, Mom. But you know you can always call me if you need anything, right? Of course, sweetheart. Though I do worry about bothering you and Jessica. You both work so hard, and I know Emma keeps you busy. You're never a bother, Mom. Liar, I thought but didn't say. Instead, I made some vague comment about maybe looking into those assisted living places he'd mentioned, just to get a feel for what was available. I could hear the excitement in his voice as he promised to set up some tours for me. Poor David. He had no idea he was walking into a trap. Over the weekend, I put the next phase of my plan into action. I drove to the local electronics store and bought a small digital recorder, the kind that could easily be hidden in a purse or pocket. The teenager who helped me showed me how to use it, probably wondering why a woman my age needed such a device. If only he knew. I also opened a new bank account at a different bank, transferring a significant portion of my savings. Margaret had advised me to protect my assets, and this was the first step. If David and Jessica were planning to manipulate me financially, They were going to find it much harder than they expected. Monday morning brought the first test of their resolve. I called David, putting on my most pathetic voice. David, honey, I hate to bother you, but I'm having trouble with the garage door opener again. And there's a leak under the kitchen sink that's getting worse. Oh no, Mom. I can't come over today, though. I have back-to-back meetings until late tonight. This was a lie. I knew David's schedule because he'd always been a creature of habit. Mondays were his light days, usually ending by 4 o'clock. But I played along. Oh, that's okay, dear. I'll figure something out. Actually, Mom, maybe this is a good time to think about what we discussed. If you were at Sunset Manor, you wouldn't have to worry about garage doors or plumbing leaks. They handle all of that for you. I suppose you're right, I said meekly. It is getting harder to manage everything on my own. I'm glad you're starting to see reason. I'll call them tomorrow and set up a tour for you. After I hung up, I called Alice's son-in-law, who came over that afternoon and fixed both problems in under an hour. Then I called David back and left a cheerful voicemail, letting him know everything was taken care of, thanks to my wonderful neighbors. I could imagine his frustration when he got that message. Tuesday brought the grocery gambit. I called David and asked if he could pick up a few things for me on his way home from work. I really can't today, Mom. I have a dinner meeting that might run late. Another lie. David hated dinner meetings and avoided them whenever possible. He preferred to be home with his family in the evenings. Oh, that's fine. I'll just have to see if I can manage driving to the store myself. My night vision hasn't been very good lately. Mom, maybe you shouldn't be driving at night if your vision is bad. Well, what choice do I have? I need groceries. You could call a grocery delivery service. I don't know how to do that, David. All this computer stuff is so confusing. I was laying it on thick, playing the helpless senior citizen card for all it was worth. David was torn between his natural instinct to help his mother and his wife's directive to let me struggle. Let me think about it and call you back, he said finally. He never called back, but Alice did, right on schedule, offering to take me shopping with her. We had a lovely time, and I made sure to mention it to David when he called the next day to check in. This pattern continued for 2 weeks. Every time I asked for help, David found an excuse to avoid providing it. Every time, I found another solution that didn't involve him. I could hear the growing frustration in his voice as his plan to make me dependent on their assistance backfired. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything. The hidden recorder captured several phone conversations where David made excuses for not helping. I kept a detailed journal of every request I made and every excuse he gave. Margaret reviewed everything weekly, helping me build an airtight case. They're making this almost too easy, she commented during one of our meetings. David's excuses are so transparent, and the pattern of withdrawal is clearly documented. If this ever went to court, any judge would see right through their manipulation. It's not going to court, I reminded her. I just want to protect myself. Of course. But it's good to have leverage, just in case they escalate their behavior. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. I was in my garden, deadheading the roses that Robert had planted for our 25th anniversary, when I heard a car pull into my driveway. Looking up, I saw David and Jessica getting out of their sedan, both wearing expressions I recognized from Emma's teenage years. They were coming to have a serious talk with me. I quickly activated the small recorder in my gardening apron pocket and went to meet them at the front door. "This is a surprise," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. Come in, come in. Can I get you some iced tea?" "That would be nice, Mom," David said, while Jessica looked around my living room with barely concealed distaste. I served the tea in the good china, the set that had been my mother's wedding gift to Robert and me. Jessica examined her cup as if checking for cracks or stains, which made my jaw clench. That china had hosted governors and senators back when Robert was active in local politics. "Mom, we need to talk," David began once we were all settled. Of course, dear. What about? About your living situation. We've been very patient, but it's become clear that you can't manage on your own anymore. I blinked innocently. What makes you say that? Jessica leaned forward, her voice taking on a condescending tone that made my skin crawl. Bella, we know you've been struggling. The constant calls for help, the problems with the house, the trouble with simple tasks like opening jars. But I've been managing just fine. I protested mildly. My neighbors have been wonderful, and I've figured out solutions to most of my problems. That's exactly the point, David said, his voice rising slightly. You shouldn't have to rely on neighbors for everything. What happens when Mrs. Patterson isn't available? What happens in an emergency? The same thing that happens to anyone in an emergency. I call 911. Jessica made an exasperated sound. Bella, be reasonable. You're 72 years old. Living alone in a house this size isn't practical anymore. We've found some lovely facilities where you'd be much safer and happier. I'm happy here, I said simply. But you won't be for much longer, David said, and there was something in his tone that made me look at him more closely. Mom, we can't keep running over here every time you have a problem. We have our own lives, our own responsibilities. I haven't asked you to run over here for anything in weeks, I pointed out. Because we've been too busy to help. Jessica snapped, then caught herself. What David means is that we're worried about what would happen if you really needed us and we weren't available. Like you haven't been available for the past 2 weeks? I asked softly. David had the grace to look ashamed, but Jessica pressed on. We think it would be best if you visited Sunset Manor this week.
Just to see what it's like.
They have a beautiful facility, and the staff is very friendly. I'm not interested in visiting assisted living facilities. Mom, you're being stubborn. I'm being independent. There's a difference. Jessica and David exchanged a look, and I could see them silently communicating. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment when they would show their true colors. Bella, Jessica said, her voice taking on a harder edge, let's be honest here. You can't take care of this house anymore. The garden is overgrown, the interior needs updating, and frankly, it's becoming a safety hazard. My garden is perfectly maintained, thank you very much. I was working in it when you arrived. A few rose bushes don't constitute garden maintenance, Jessica shot back. The back lawn needs reseeding, the flower beds are full of weeds, and don't get me started on the state of the gutters. I felt my temper starting to rise, but I kept my voice calm. If you're so concerned about the maintenance of my home, you're welcome to help with it. Robert and I always kept this place immaculate. Robert's been gone for 3 years, Jessica said bluntly. And you're not getting any younger. Face facts, Bella. You need help, and we can't provide it anymore. Can't? Or won't? David squirmed in his chair. Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be. Harder for whom? You haven't made any effort to help me in weeks. Every time I've called, you've had an excuse. Every time I've needed something, you've been too busy. So tell me, David, exactly how is my moving to assisted living going to change anything? It will give you the support you need without burdening us, Jessica said, and the honesty of that statement hung in the air like a slap. I see. I set down my teacup with deliberate care. So, this isn't about my safety or happiness. This is about your convenience. That's not fair, David protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Jessica just admitted that I'm a burden to you. And you, David, have made it clear through your actions that helping your mother is no longer a priority. We have other priorities, Jessica said defensively. Emma's education, our jobs, our own future. We can't sacrifice everything to take care of you. I never asked you to sacrifice everything. I never asked you to sacrifice anything at all.
You didn't have to ask.
The constant worry, the phone calls, the the trips over here to fix things or bring groceries. It adds up, Bella. It's exhausting. I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised to be kind and honorable, and saw a stranger. Is that how you feel, David? That caring for your mother is exhausting? He couldn't meet my eyes. Mom, I love you. But Jessica's right. We can't keep up this level of involvement in your daily life. It's not sustainable. Then don't, I said simply. Don't involve yourselves in my daily life. I've been managing just fine without your help for the past 2 weeks. But that's not a long-term solution, Jessica insisted. What happens when you have a real emergency? What happens when your health starts to decline? The same thing that happens to millions of other people my age. I'll deal with it when the time comes. That's not good enough, David said, finally finding his backbone, though he was using it in the wrong direction. Mom, we've made up our minds. We think you should move to Sunset Manor, and we're not going to enable your stubbornness anymore. Enable my stubbornness? Is that what we're calling my desire to live in my own home now? You're being unreasonable, Jessica said. And if you won't listen to logic, then maybe you need to experience what it's really like to live alone without any support system. There it was, the threat I'd been waiting for. I looked at both of them, these people who claimed to love me while plotting to manipulate me out of my home for their own financial gain. I think you should leave now, I said quietly. Mom, David started.
No.
I think you've said enough. Both of you. I stood up, my hands surprisingly steady. You've made your position clear. You find caring for me burdensome, and you think I'm incapable of living independently. You want me to give up my home and move into an institution so you don't have to worry about me anymore. It's not an institution, Jessica protested. It's a lovely facility with activities and… Get out. The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I was past caring about politeness. These people had spent the last 20 minutes telling me I was a burden and a problem to be solved. I was done listening. Mom, please, David said, standing as well. We're trying to help you. No, you're trying to help yourselves. And you know what? You've succeeded. I won't be a burden to you anymore, David. I won't call you for help. I won't ask you for anything, and I won't expect anything from you. Your involvement in my daily life, as you put it, is over. You don't mean that, he said, but he sounded uncertain. I absolutely mean it. Now please leave my house. They left, Jessica muttering under her breath about stubborn old women, David looking back over his shoulder as if he wanted to say something else. I watched them drive away, then went inside and played back the recording of our conversation.
Perfect.
I had everything I needed. The next morning, I called Margaret and asked her to expedite the changes to my will. I also asked her to draft a formal letter to David and Jessica, outlining their recent behavior and my response to it. Are you sure about this, Bella? Margaret asked. Once we send this letter, there's no going back. Your relationship with David may never recover. My relationship with David changed the moment he decided I was more valuable to him as a real estate opportunity than as his mother, I replied. I'm just making it official. The letter was delivered by courier that afternoon. In it, Margaret outlined David and Jessica's plan to isolate me and force me into assisted living, their admission that they found caring for me burdensome, and their threat to withdraw all support if I didn't comply with their wishes. The letter also informed them that as a result of their behavior, they were no longer welcome in my home, and that my will had been changed to reflect this new reality. David called within an hour of receiving the letter, his voice panicked and angry. Mom, what is this? What are you doing? I'm protecting myself, David. Something I apparently can't rely on my own son to do. You can't cut me out of your will because of one conversation. I can do whatever I want with my will. It's my money and my property. But, Mom, we were just trying to help you. By threatening to abandon me if I didn't do what you wanted? By admitting that caring for me was a burden? By planning to sell my home the moment I was out of the way. There was a long pause. How did you? We never said anything about selling the house. Didn't you? Are you sure about that, David? Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear him thinking, trying to remember exactly what had been said and when. Mom, please. Let's talk about this reasonably. Jessica and I made some mistakes, but we can work this out. The time for a reasonable conversation was before you decided to manipulate me out of my home. That ship has sailed. What do you want from us? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. We're both sorry. We handled this badly. I don't want anything from you, David. That's the point. I don't want your help, your concern, or your presence in my life. You've made it clear that I'm a burden to you, so I'm removing that burden. You're my mother. Yes, I am. And you're my son. But that doesn't give you the right to treat me like a problem to be solved instead of a person to be respected. Jessica was right, he said, his voice turning bitter. You are stubborn and cruel. Do you have any idea what you're doing to Emma? She loves her grandmother. The mention of my granddaughter was a low blow, and we both knew it. Emma is always welcome in my home. You and Jessica are not. You can't separate us like that. We're her parents. Then I guess you'll have to decide what's more important to you, your pride or your daughter's relationship with her grandmother. I hung up before he could respond. The next few days were blissfully quiet. No calls from David, no unexpected visits, no manipulative conversations disguised as concern for my welfare. I worked in my garden, read books from my ever-growing to-read pile, and enjoyed the peace of a house that was mine and mine alone. Alice came by daily, ostensibly to check on me, but really just to visit. We'd become closer through this whole ordeal, and I was grateful for her friendship. Any word from David? She asked one afternoon as we sat on my back porch, watching the birds at the feeder Robert had built. Nothing. And I prefer it that way. You don't miss him? I considered the question. Did I miss my son? I miss the boy he used to be. The man who had called just to hear my voice, who brought Emma over to play in the garden, who genuinely cared about my well-being. But that man has been replaced by someone I don't recognize. Someone who sees me as a burden and an asset rather than his mother. People change when money's involved, Alice said sadly. I've seen it in my own family. Decent people who turn into vultures when there's an inheritance at stake. The ironic thing is, if David had just been patient and loving, he would have inherited everything anyway. Now he gets nothing. What about Emma? That was the part that broke my heart. I've set up a trust fund for her education. She'll be taken care of, regardless of what her parents do. And the house goes to Michael. He's the only one of my children who still sees me as a person rather than a problem. Alice nodded approvingly. Good for you. And good for Michael. He deserves it. Michael called that evening, his voice full of concern. Mom, David called me. He's really upset about some letter you sent him. What's going on? I'd been dreading this conversation. Michael and David had always been close despite their differences, and I didn't want to put Michael in the middle of this mess. But he deserved to know the truth. Sit down, sweetheart. This is going to take a while. I told him everything. The overheard conversation, David and Jessica's plan to manipulate me out of my home, their admission that caring for me was burdensome, their threat to withdraw support if I didn't comply. Michael listened without interruption, but I could hear his breathing grow heavier as the story unfolded.
Jesus Christ, Mom.
I can't believe. This is David we're talking about. My brother. I know, honey. I can barely believe it myself. And Jessica actually said they wanted to sell your house to pay for Emma's college? Among other things. Your father's lake house mortgage, her mother's medical bills. Apparently my home is the solution to all their financial problems. But that's fraud. Elder abuse. Mom, You could press charges. I don't want to press charges against my own son. I just want to be left alone to live my life in peace. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Michael spoke again, his voice was tight with anger. I'm going to call David. This is unacceptable. Michael, please don't get involved. This is between David and me. Like hell it is. He's my brother, and you're my mother. I'm not going to stand by and watch him treat you like this. What will you accomplish by getting involved? You'll just drive a wedge between you and David, and I'll still be in the same situation.
Maybe.
Or maybe I can talk some sense into him. Make him realize what he's throwing away. I sighed. Michael meant well, but he didn't understand that David's transformation wasn't something that could be reasoned away. When people show you who they really are, you should believe them. Do what you think is best, sweetheart.
But don't do it for me.
Do it because you think it's right. I love you, Mom. And I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Dad would be proud too. After we hung up, I sat in Robert's old chair and wondered what he would think of all this. Would he be proud of how I'd handled things? Or would he think I was being too harsh? Robert had always been more forgiving than me, more willing to see the best in people even when they disappointed him. But Robert had also been fiercely protective of his family. He would never have stood for anyone treating me the way David and Jessica had, even if that someone was his own son. I hope I'm doing the right thing, I whispered to the empty room, and for just a moment, I could almost feel Robert's presence, his hand on my shoulder, his voice telling me that everything would be okay. 3 days later, Michael called back. His voice was strained, and I could tell the conversation with David hadn't gone well. I talked to him, Mom. It didn't go the way I hoped. What happened? He's angry. Really angry. He says you're being manipulative and vindictive. He actually used the word vengeful. He thinks you're punishing him and Jessica for trying to help you. I felt a familiar stab of pain. Even now, even after everything, David couldn't see past his own justifications to understand what he'd done wrong. And what do you think, Michael? I think my brother has lost his damn mind. I think Jessica has poisoned him against you, and I think he's so focused on money that he's forgotten what family is supposed to mean. I'm sorry you had to get involved in this. Don't be sorry. I needed to hear it from his own mouth. I needed to understand what kind of person he's become. Michael's voice was heavy with disappointment. He kept talking about your house like it was already his. About how unfair it was that you were threatening his inheritance just because he couldn't help you as much as he used to. His inheritance, I repeated bitterly. I'm not dead yet. That's exactly what I told him. I said, David, she's our mother, not a bank account waiting to mature. But he wouldn't listen. He's convinced himself that he's the victim in all this.
I'm sorry, Michael.
I know how much David means to you. He means a lot to me, but not more than you do, and certainly not more than what's right. Michael paused. Mom, there's something else. About Emma. My heart clenched. What about Emma? David says he's not going to let her visit you anymore. He thinks you're becoming unstable, and he doesn't want her exposed to your vindictive behavior. The words hit me like a physical blow. Emma was the light of my life, the one pure joy in this whole mess. The thought of not seeing her, of her growing up thinking I was some crazy old woman who'd turned against her family, was almost unbearable. He can't keep her from me forever, I said, though my voice shook. Actually, Mom, he can. She's a minor, and he's her father. Legally, he has the right to decide who she sees. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of David's revenge settling over me like a shroud. He couldn't get my house, so he was taking my granddaughter instead. It was cruel and calculated, and it told me everything I needed to know about the man my son had become. There might be a way around it, Michael continued. Grandparents' rights laws vary by state, but in some cases, You can petition the court for visitation rights. I'm not taking my son to court over my granddaughter. That would just make everything worse. Then what are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted. I honestly don't know. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Emma, about the last time I'd seen her. She'd been so excited about starting high school, so full of plans and dreams. What would David tell her about why Grandma wasn't around anymore? Would he paint me as the villain in the story? I got up and went to the photo albums, flipping through decades of family pictures. There was David as a baby, chubby and smiling in Robert's arms. David on his first day of school, gap-toothed and proud. David at his wedding, looking at Jessica with such love and devotion that it made my heart ache. When had it all gone wrong? When had my loving, thoughtful son turned into someone who could threaten to abandon his own mother for money? Maybe it had been gradual, so slow that I hadn't noticed. Maybe Jessica's influence had been stronger than I'd realized. Or maybe the seeds of greed and selfishness had always been there, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right circumstances to bloom. I closed the albums and made myself a cup of tea, sitting at the kitchen table where I'd had breakfast with Robert for 42 years. The house felt different now, lonelier. Not because I was alone, but because I'd lost something I could never get back, the illusion that my family was solid and unbreakable. The phone rang, startling me out of my melancholy. It was nearly midnight. Who would be calling so late? Hello?
Grandma Bella?
It's me.
Emma.
My heart leaped, then immediately filled with worry. Why was she calling so late? And why did her voice sound so strange? Emma, sweetheart, what's wrong? Are you okay? I'm okay, but... She paused, and I could hear her crying softly. Dad took my phone away, but I'm using Mom's old one. Grandma, why won't you talk to Dad anymore? Why are you and Daddy fighting? My heart broke all over again. David had told her something, but clearly not the whole truth. It's complicated, honey. Your daddy and I have some disagreements about grown-up things. He says you're sick. He says you're not thinking clearly anymore, and that's why you're being mean to him and Mom.
Sick.
Not thinking clearly. David was already laying the groundwork to discredit me, to make Emma think I was losing my mind. It was clever and cruel, and it made me angrier than I'd been through this entire ordeal. Emma, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I am not sick. My mind is perfectly clear. Your daddy and I had a disagreement about where I should live, and some things were said that hurt my feelings very much. But why can't you just say you're sorry and make up? How do you explain betrayal to a 14-year-old? How do you tell a child that her father sees her grandmother as nothing more than a source of money? Sometimes, sweetheart, people do things that can't be fixed with just an apology. Sometimes people show you who they really are, and you have to accept that and protect yourself. I don't understand. I know you don't, and I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. I miss you, Grandma. I miss our talks and working in the garden with you. Dad says I can't come see you anymore. I miss you too, more than you know. And I want you to remember something very important. No matter what happens between your father and me, no matter what anyone tells you about me, I love you. I will always love you. That will never change. I love you too, Grandma. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Has your father or mother said anything about my house? About me moving somewhere else? There was a pause. Mom said you might have to move to one of those places where old people live. She said it would be better for you, because you'd have people to take care of you. And what do you think about that? I think it's stupid. You're not like other old people. You're not sick or confused or anything. You're just Grandma. Out of the mouths of babes. Emma saw what David and Jessica refused to see, that I was still a capable, independent woman who didn't need to be managed or controlled. Thank you for that, sweetheart. It means more to me than you know. Grandma, can I still call you sometimes? Even if Dad doesn't want me to? I hesitated. I didn't want to encourage Emma to deceive her parents, but I also couldn't bear the thought of losing contact with her completely. If you can do it safely, without getting in trouble, then yes. But Emma, if your parents find out and get angry, you tell them it was my idea, okay? Don't let them blame you for wanting to talk to your grandmother. Okay. I have to go now. I think I hear Dad coming upstairs. I love you, Emma. Don't forget that. I love you too, Grandma.
Bye.
The line went dead, and I sat in my kitchen crying for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Not for myself, but for my granddaughter, who was caught in the middle of a war she didn't understand and couldn't control. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was deadheading roses when a car I didn't recognize pulled into my driveway. A woman got out, middle-aged and professional-looking, carrying a briefcase and wearing an expression of polite concern. Mrs. Maris? I'm Sarah Thompson from Adult Protective Services. I'd like to speak with you if you have a few minutes. My blood ran cold. Adult Protective Services? Someone had reported me, and I had a pretty good idea who. Of course, I said, pulling off my gardening gloves. Would you like to come inside? That would be fine, thank you. I led her into the living room, the same room where David and Jessica had ambushed me 2 weeks ago. Sarah Thompson looked around appraisingly, taking in the clean, well-maintained space, the fresh flowers, the family photos. Mrs. Maris, we received a report expressing concern about your welfare. The caller was worried that you might be living in unsafe conditions or experiencing some cognitive decline. I see. And who is this concerned caller? I'm not at liberty to say, but I can tell you it was a family member. David. It had to be David. This was his next move in the chess game we were playing. If he couldn't manipulate me out of my home, he'd try to have me declared incompetent. Well, as you can see, I'm living in perfectly safe conditions. The house is clean and well-maintained. I'm properly dressed and groomed, and I think you'll find my mental faculties are quite intact. Sarah Thompson smiled. I can see that. But I do have to ask some questions, just to complete my assessment. Is that okay? For the next hour, she put me through a series of questions and tests. Could I remember my address, my social security number, the current date? Could I manage my own finances? Did I have any difficulty with daily activities like cooking, cleaning, or personal hygiene? I answered everything easily, even submitting to a brief cognitive assessment that I passed with flying colors. Sarah Thompson made notes throughout, her expression growing more skeptical with each passing minute. Mrs. Maris, can you tell me about your relationship with your family? Specifically, have there been any recent conflicts or changes in your support system? This was the crux of it. I could lie, downplay the situation, try to make it sound like a simple misunderstanding. Or I could tell the truth and risk having my family drama become part of an official record. I chose the truth. I told her everything, from the overheard phone conversation to the confrontation in my living room to Emma's midnight phone call. I showed her the recordings I'd made, the journal I'd kept, the letter Margaret had sent to David and Jessica. Sarah Thompson listened without interruption, her expression growing more serious as the story unfolded. Mrs. Maris, what you're describing sounds like attempted financial exploitation and emotional abuse. Have you considered filing a formal complaint? I've considered it, but I don't want to press charges against my own son. I understand. But you should know that what you've documented here constitutes a clear pattern of manipulation and coercion. Your son and daughter-in-law's behavior toward you is unacceptable, and their attempt to have you investigated by APS is likely retaliation for your refusal to comply with their demands. So, you don't think I need to be in assisted living? Sarah Thompson laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. Mrs. Maris, you're one of the most capable and independent seniors I've ever assessed. Your home is immaculate, your mental faculties are excellent, and you've clearly established a strong support network with your neighbors and friends. Whoever called in this report either has a very distorted view of your capabilities or an ulterior motive for wanting you declared incompetent. Relief washed over me. What happens now? I'll file my report stating that the concerns raised were unfounded and that you're living safely and independently. The case will be closed, and whoever made the report will be notified of the outcome. Will they know that you told me it was a family member who called? No, but they'll be able to guess. Mrs. Maris, I want you to know that if you ever feel unsafe or threatened, you can call our office. What your family is doing to you isn't acceptable, and you don't have to tolerate it. After Sarah Thompson left, I called Margaret and updated her on the APS visit. She was furious but not surprised. This is escalation, Bella. David is getting desperate. First he tries manipulation, then emotional blackmail. Now he's trying to have you declared incompetent. What's next? I don't know, and frankly, I don't want to find out. We need to be proactive. I'm going to file for a restraining order.
Margaret, no.
I don't want to escalate this any further. Bella, he's already escalated it. He called APS and made false accusations about your mental state. That's serious. If he's willing to lie to government agencies, what else is he willing to do? I thought about Emma's phone call, about David's threat to keep her away from me, about the coldness in Jessica's eyes when she talked about getting me out of my home. All right, I said finally. Do what you think is necessary. The restraining order was filed that afternoon. It prohibited David and Jessica from coming to my home, contacting me directly, or making any further reports to government agencies without cause. They would be notified by mail, along with a copy of the APS report stating that the concerns they'd raised were unfounded. I should have felt victorious. I'd outmaneuvered them at every turn, protected my assets, and exposed their manipulative behavior to the authorities. But all I felt was empty and sad. I'd won the war, but I'd lost my son in the process. That evening, Alice came over with a casserole and a bottle of wine. Heard you had some excitement today, she said, settling into Robert's chair as if she belonged there. News travels fast in this neighborhood. Sarah Thompson is my cousin's daughter. She called me after she left here, just to let me know everything was okay. She was pretty impressed with you, by the way. That's something, I suppose. Alice studied my face. You don't look like someone who just won a major victory. Because I don't feel like I won anything. I feel like I lost my son. Honey, you lost your son the moment he decided you were worth more to him dead than alive. This just made it official. Maybe, but it still hurts. Of course it hurts. He's your child. But Bella, you need to understand something. The David who's doing this to you isn't the David you raised. That boy is gone, replaced by someone you don't recognize. You can't mourn the person he became, but you can celebrate the person he used to be. I keep thinking about when he was little. He was such a sweet child, always worried about everyone else. When Robert had his first heart attack, David was only 12, but he appointed himself my protector. He'd bring me tea and make sure I was taking my medication. He was so concerned about taking care of me. And now he's using that same protective instinct to justify taking away your independence. It's twisted, but it's not entirely out of character. What do you mean? David always needed to feel useful, needed to feel like he was solving problems. When you didn't need him to solve the problem of your living situation, he created a crisis, so he could be the hero who rescued you from it. When that didn't work, he tried to create a different crisis by having you investigated. It's the same controlling behavior, just dressed up as concern. I never thought of it that way, but Alice was right. David's need to manage and control had always been there, masked as helpfulness and concern. I'd enabled it over the years, letting him handle things I could have handled myself, because it made him feel needed. So what do I do now? You live your life. You enjoy your home, your garden, your friends. You love Emma from a distance and hope that someday she'll understand what really happened here. And you let David live with the consequences of his choices. It's not that simple. It's not simple, but it is that straightforward. Bella, you've spent your whole life putting your family's needs before your own. You stayed home with the boys when you wanted to go back to work. You let Robert make all the financial decisions even though you were better with money. You've enabled David's controlling behavior for decades. Maybe it's time to put yourself first for once. I don't know how to do that. Start small. What do you want to do that you haven't been able to do because you are too busy taking care of everyone else? I thought about it. What did I want? For so long, my wants had been secondary to everyone else's needs that I'd almost forgotten I had any. I'd like to travel, I said finally. Robert always wanted to stay close to home, and then after he died, I felt like I needed to be available for the family. But I've always wanted to see Europe. Italy, especially. So go to Italy. By myself. Why not? You're 72, not 92. You're healthy, financially stable, and completely independent. What's stopping you? I don't know. Fear, I suppose. I've never traveled alone. Then it's time you learned. Life's too short to spend it waiting for other people's permission to be happy. That night, I lay in bed thinking about Italy, about walking through the streets of Rome, seeing the Sistine Chapel, eating gelato in a sidewalk cafe in Florence. Robert had always said we'd go someday, but someday never came. He was too busy with work, then too worried about leaving the boys, then too concerned about the expense. There was nothing stopping me from going now except my own fear, and I was tired of being afraid. The next morning, I called a travel agent and booked a 2-week tour of Italy, leaving in 6 weeks. It was impulsive and terrifying and absolutely liberating. I also called Michael to tell him about the APS visit and the restraining order.
Jesus, mon.
I can't believe David called APS on you. That's beyond the pale. I'm just glad the investigator could see through it. What are you going to do now? I told him about the Italy trip, and he was quiet for a long moment. That's amazing, Mom. Dad always talked about taking you to Europe, but he never followed through. I know, but I'm done waiting for other people to make my dreams come true. Good for you. And Mom, I'm proud of you for standing up to David, for protecting yourself, for not letting them bully you into giving up your home. Dad would be proud too. I hope so. I've tried to handle this the way he would have wanted. You've handled it better than he would have. Dad would have been furious. He probably would have said things he couldn't take back.
Maybe.
But he also would have protected me, which is more than I can say for my own son. David's lost his way, Mom. Maybe someday he'll find it again. Maybe. But I'm not holding my breath. 2 weeks later, I was pruning the apple tree in my backyard when I saw a familiar car pull into my driveway. For a moment, my heart leaped, thinking it might be David, that he'd come to apologize and try to make things right. But it was Emma who got out of the car, not David. She looked around nervously, then hurried toward the backyard where she'd seen me through the gate. Grandma. I dropped my pruning shears and caught her in a fierce hug. She was taller than I remembered, more grown up, but she was still my Emma. Sweetheart, what are you doing here? Does your father know where you are? No. And please don't tell him. I told him I was going to Sarah's house to study. I walked here from school. Emma, you can't. Please, Grandma. I just need to see you. I need to understand what's happening. I looked at my granddaughter, this beautiful, intelligent girl who was caught in the middle of a war she hadn't chosen, and my heart broke all over again. Come inside. We'll talk. I made her favorite snack, peanut butter cookies and milk, and we sat at the kitchen table where I'd shared so many meals with her over the years. Tell me what your father has said about me, I said gently.
He says you're sick.
Not physically sick, but mentally. He says you're becoming paranoid and vindictive and that you're trying to hurt our family because you're confused about what's real. And what do you think? Emma looked around the... I'm not crazy, Emma. I'm not confused or paranoid. Your father and I had a serious disagreement about my living situation, and some very hurtful things were said. Things that can't be taken back. But why can't you just forgive him? Families are supposed to forgive each other. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, sweetheart. And it doesn't mean allowing people to continue hurting you. I struggled to find a way to explain the situation without completely destroying Emma's relationship with her father. Despite everything, I didn't want her to hate David. He was still her father, and she would need to have some kind of relationship with him. Sometimes, people we love disappoint us in ways that change everything. Your father wants me to give up my home and move into an assisted living facility. When I refused, he and your mother tried to force me by threatening to stop helping me with things I needed. But isn't that kind of mean? Threatening to abandon someone. I thought so. But they believed they were doing what was best for me, even if I didn't agree. So you're both kind of right?
No, Emma.
I'm not kind of right. I'm completely right. What your parents did was wrong and hurtful, and I won't pretend otherwise just to keep the peace. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing this. Is it true that you changed your will? That Dad won't inherit the house anymore? I sighed.
She'd heard about that too.
Yes, it's true. Why? Because your father made it clear that he saw my home as his inheritance rather than my sanctuary. Because he was more interested in the money my house would bring than in my happiness or well-being. That's horrible. Yes, it is. And it broke my heart to learn that about my own son. Emma reached across the table and took my hand.
I'm sorry, Grandma.
I don't understand why Dad is being like this. He used to be different. People change, sweetheart. Sometimes not for the better. Will you ever forgive him? I don't know. Forgiveness is something that has to be earned, not just given. Your father would have to acknowledge what he did wrong and make real amends for it. He'd have to change his behavior and his attitude. I don't see that happening. He really hurt you, didn't he? Yes, he did. More than I ever thought possible. Emma squeezed my hand. I love you, Grandma. And I don't care what Dad says. I'm going to keep visiting you. Emma, I don't want you to get in trouble. I don't care. This is stupid. You're my grandmother, and I love you, and Dad can't stop me from seeing you. I wanted to warn her that David absolutely could stop her from seeing me, and probably would when he found out about this visit. But Emma was 14, old enough to start making some of her own decisions about relationships and family. Then I suppose I'll just have to make sure you don't get caught, I said. We spent the next hour talking about school, her friends, her plans for high school. Normal grandmother-granddaughter conversation that felt both precious and bittersweet. When it was time for her to leave, I walked her to the front gate. Emma, I want you to know that no matter what happens, no matter what anyone tells you about me, I love you. That will never change. I know, Grandma. I love you too. She hugged me tight, then hurried away toward town. I watched until she was out of sight, then went inside and cried. That evening, David called. His voice was furious and accusing. Emma was at your house today. It wasn't a question, so I didn't treat it like one. Yes, she was. I specifically told you that you weren't allowed to see her. You told me you weren't going to let her visit me. You never said I couldn't see her if she chose to visit on her own. Don't play word games with me, Mom. You know what I meant. I know exactly what you meant. You meant to use my granddaughter as a weapon against me. You meant to punish me for not doing what you wanted by keeping Emma away from me. I meant to protect my daughter from your vindictive behavior. My vindictive behavior? David, listen to yourself. I protected myself from your manipulation and abuse, and you're calling that vindictive. You turned my own daughter against me. I did no such thing. I told Emma the truth about our situation, which is more than you've done. She's smart enough to see through your lies. If you contact her again, I'll file for a restraining order. Go right ahead. But understand this. Emma came to me, not the other way around. She sought me out because she loves me and because she can see that your version of events doesn't match reality. You can try to keep her away from me, but you can't control what she thinks or feels. Watch me. The line went dead. I sat there holding the phone, wondering how long it would be before David made good on his threat. And more importantly, wondering how Emma would react when he did. I didn't have to wait long to find out. 3 days later, Alice came over with news. I ran into Jessica at the grocery store today, she said, settling into her usual chair with a cup of coffee. She looked absolutely furious. What happened? Apparently, Emma has been giving them hell about not letting her see you. She's refusing to speak to them, won't come to dinner, locked herself in her room. Jessica said they're at their wits' end. Despite everything, I felt a surge of pride in my granddaughter. She was standing up for what she believed in, even when it was difficult. They're going to blame me for that too, I said. Probably. But Emma's 14, not 4. She's old enough to have opinions about family relationships, and she's clearly chosen her side. I don't want her to be in the middle of this. She's not in the middle, Bella. She's on your side. There's a difference. The next week brought 2 pieces of news that changed everything. The first came from Margaret, who called me with barely contained excitement in her voice. Bella, you need to sit down for this. I just received a very interesting phone call from David's attorney. David has an attorney now. Apparently. And this attorney wants to meet with us to discuss a possible resolution to your family situation. What kind of resolution? That's what we're going to find out. But Bella, the fact that they're reaching out suggests they're in a weaker position than they want to admit. David may have overplayed his hand. The second piece of news came from Michael, who called that evening sounding both angry and confused. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, sweetheart. Did you really threaten to have David arrested for elder abuse? I was taken aback.
What?
No, I never threatened any such thing. Why would you ask that? Because David called me today, absolutely hysterical. He said you'd hired some hotshot lawyer who was threatening to press criminal charges unless he agreed to your demands. My demands? Michael, I haven't made any demands. I just want to be left alone. That's what I figured. David's story didn't make sense. He kept talking about how you were trying to destroy his family and ruin his reputation. He said you were using Emma to manipulate him. Emma made her own decision to visit me. I didn't ask her to come, and I didn't ask her to take sides in this conflict. I know that, Mom. But David is convinced you're orchestrating some kind of campaign against him. He's getting paranoid. Maybe his conscience is finally catching up with him. Maybe. But Mom, be careful. Paranoid people do desperate things. That night, I lay awake thinking about Michael's warning. What desperate things might David do? He'd already tried manipulation, emotional blackmail, and false accusations to government agencies. What was left? I got my answer 2 days later when I returned from grocery shopping to find my front door standing wide open. My first instinct was to call the police, but something made me hesitate. Nothing looked disturbed from what I could see through the doorway. The house didn't look ransacked or vandalized. It looked normal. I walked through each room, checking for signs of a break-in. Nothing was missing. Nothing was damaged. But I could tell someone had been there. Small things were out of place. A book on the coffee table that I'd left on the side table, a kitchen towel folded differently than I'd left it, family photos that had been moved slightly. Someone had been in my house, going through my things, but they'd been careful not to leave obvious evidence. It was almost more disturbing than if they'd trashed the place. I called the police, who came and took a report but admitted there wasn't much they could do. No signs of forced entry, Nothing missing, no obvious evidence of criminal activity. Looks like someone had a key, Officer Martinez said. Any idea who might have access to your house? I thought about it. Robert and I had given spare keys to both our sons years ago, for emergencies. After Robert died, I never asked for them back. My son David has a key, I admitted. Would he have any reason to enter your house without permission? We've been having some family disagreements lately. It's possible he was looking for something. You should probably change your locks, Officer Martinez advised. And maybe consider a security system. After the police left, I called a locksmith and had all the locks changed that same day. Then I called Margaret and told her what had happened. This is escalation, she said grimly. He's getting desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. But what was he looking for? Probably evidence of your mental instability. Documents, medication, anything he could use to support a claim that you're not competent to make your own decisions. There's nothing like that for him to find. I know. But he doesn't know that. Bella, I think we need to move up our meeting with his attorney. This situation is getting out of hand. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Margaret and I arrived at the law offices of Brennan and Associates at exactly 2 o'clock. David was already there with his attorney, a sharp-faced man in his 40s named Robert Brennan, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. David would meet my eyes when I entered the conference room. He looked haggard, older than his 48 years, with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous energy that made him fidget constantly with his pen. Mrs. Maris, Robert Brennan said, standing as we entered. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I think we can resolve this situation in a way that benefits everyone. Margaret and I took seats across from David and his lawyer. The polished conference table felt like a barrier between us, cold and impersonal. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Brennan? Margaret asked without preamble. My client is willing to drop all concerns about Mrs. Maris's living situation and agree to respect her independence in exchange for certain considerations. What kind of considerations? I asked. David finally looked at me, and I was shocked by the desperation in his eyes. Mom, I know we've had our differences, but we're still family. We can work this out. What do you want, David? Robert Brennan opened a folder and pulled out a document. We're proposing a family agreement that would restore normal relations between you and your son's family, including regular visitation with your granddaughter. In exchange for what? A revision to your current will, restoring your son as the primary beneficiary of your estate. I stared at him in disbelief. You want me to buy back my relationship with my own son and granddaughter? That's not how we're framing it, Brennan said smoothly. We're simply suggesting that family harmony is worth more than money, and that your recent changes to your estate planning may have been made in anger rather than careful consideration. Margaret's voice was ice cold. Are you seriously suggesting that Mrs. Maris pay her son to have a relationship with her? We're suggesting that family relationships are complicated, and sometimes compromises need to be made. I looked at David, searching his face for any sign of the boy I'd raised. David, is this really what you want? To extort money from your own mother? It's not extortion, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Mom, we both said things we didn't mean. We both made mistakes. This is a way to start fresh. I didn't make any mistakes, David. I protected myself from your manipulation and abuse. You're the one who decided money was more important than family. That's not true, isn't it? You're sitting here with a lawyer, trying to negotiate your way back into my will. You're holding my relationship with Emma hostage until I agree to give you my house. How is that not putting money before family? David's facade cracked slightly. Do you have any idea what you've put us through? Emma won't speak to us. Jessica is furious. Our friends are asking questions. You've made us look like monsters in our own community. I've done nothing but tell the truth. If that makes you look like monsters, perhaps you should examine your own behavior. Your truth is twisted by your anger and resentment, Robert Brennan interjected. My client is willing to overlook your recent vindictive actions and restore normal family relations, but he needs some assurance that his family's future is secure. Margaret leaned forward. Let me make something very clear, Mr. Brennan. Your client has engaged in a pattern of manipulation, coercion, and emotional abuse toward his elderly mother. He has made false reports to government agencies, unlawfully entered her home, and attempted to isolate her from support systems. If anyone should be making concessions here, it's your client. Those are serious accusations. Do you have proof? Margaret smiled and pulled out her own folder. Recorded conversations, written documentation, testimony from Adult Protective Services, witness statements from neighbors, police reports. We have everything we need to file criminal charges if necessary. David went pale. Criminal charges? Elder abuse, attempted financial exploitation, breaking and entering, filing false reports, Margaret enumerated. Any one of those could result in serious legal consequences for you, David. You're bluffing, Brennan said, but he looked nervous. Try me, Margaret replied. Mrs. Maris has been extraordinarily patient with her son's behavior, but that patience has limits. I watched David process this information, saw the exact moment when he realized how deep a hole he'd dug for himself. His hands were shaking now, and sweat beaded on his forehead. What do you want? He asked quietly. I want my son back, I said simply. Not the man sitting across from me who sees me as a source of money, but the boy I raised who actually cared about my welfare. I want David to acknowledge what he's done wrong and make real amends for it. I want him to stop trying to control my life and accept that I'm capable of making my own decisions. And if I do that, then maybe we can start to rebuild our relationship. But David, that rebuilding starts with you, not with changes to my will. Robert Brennan whispered something to David, who shook his head violently. My client needs some assurance, Brennan began. Your client needs to accept reality. Margaret cut him off. His mother owes him nothing. Any inheritance he receives will be a gift, not a right. And gifts aren't given to people who abuse the giver. This is ridiculous, David said, standing abruptly. Mom, you're being completely unreasonable. We tried to help you, and you've turned it into some kind of persecution complex. Sit down, David, I said firmly. We're not finished. Something in my voice must have reminded him of his childhood because he sat down immediately, looking surprised at his own compliance. I want to tell you a story, I said, about a woman who spent 50 years putting her family's needs before her own, who stayed home when she wanted to work, who let her husband make all the decisions even when she disagreed, who enabled her son's controlling behavior because she thought it meant he cared about her. Mom, I'm not finished. This woman watched her husband die and thought she was alone in the world. But she wasn't alone. She had friends, neighbors, a community of people who cared about her. She had interests and dreams and goals that had nothing to do with being someone's wife or mother. I leaned forward, holding David's gaze. And then her son decided she was too old and too helpless to live her own life. He decided he knew better than she did what was good for her. He decided her home was wasted on her and would be better used as his inheritance. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. And when she refused to comply with his plans, he tried to force her by withdrawing his support and love. He threatened to keep her granddaughter away from her. He called government agencies and made false reports about her mental state. He broke into her home looking for evidence of incompetence. David couldn't meet my eyes anymore. He was staring at the table, his shoulders slumped in defeat. So here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to stop trying to control my life. You're going to stop making demands about my will or my living situation. You're going to allow Emma to visit me whenever she wants, without harassment or punishment. And if I don't, then Margaret files criminal charges and you deal with the legal and professional consequences of your actions. Your choice. The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, David looked up at me, and for the first time in months, I saw something resembling remorse in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I didn't mean for things to get this far out of hand." "What did you mean, David? I was worried about you. After Dad died, you seemed so fragile. And the house is so big, and you're getting older, and I thought if you were somewhere safer, with people to take care of you, I wouldn't have to worry anymore. And the money? Your inheritance." David's face flushed. "We do have financial pressures. Emma's education, the mortgage, Jessica's mother's medical bills. When I saw how much the house was worth, I thought it could solve all our problems. At the cost of my happiness and independence. I told myself you'd be happier at Sunset Manor, that you'd make friends and have activities and not have to worry about maintaining the house. You told yourself that because it made your plans seem altruistic instead of selfish." David nodded, tears starting to form in his eyes. "You're right."
I'm sorry, Mom.
"I'm so sorry. It wasn't enough." An apology didn't undo months of manipulation and emotional abuse. But it was a start. "If you're truly sorry, David, then prove it. Stop trying to control my life. Accept that I'm a capable adult who can make her own decisions. Treat me with the respect you'd show any other person my age. I will. I promise. And Emma? She can visit you whenever she wants. I won't interfere." Margaret cleared her throat. "I'll need all of this in writing. A formal agreement acknowledging your past behavior and committing to specific changes going forward. And if you violate this agreement," I added, "there will be I." Robert Brennan looked like he wanted to object, but David waved him off.
It's over, Bob.
"I screwed up, and now I have to live with the consequences." The formal agreement was drafted and signed within the hour. David would respect my independence and stop attempting to control my living situation. He would allow Emma unrestricted access to me. He would not contest my current will or make any further demands regarding my estate. In return, I would not press criminal charges for his past behavior. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was peace. As we prepared to leave, David stopped me at the elevator. "Mom, I know I don't deserve it, but is there any chance we can rebuild our relationship?" I studied his face, looking for signs of sincerity. "I don't know, David. Trust, once broken, is very hard to repair. I want to try. I want to be the son you deserve. Then be that son. Not because you want something from me, but because it's the right thing to do." He nodded. Can I call you sometime? Just to talk. We'll see." It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd been willing to offer an hour earlier. The elevator arrived, and Margaret and I stepped inside. As the doors closed, I saw David still standing there, looking lost and confused, like a child who just realized the magnitude of his mistakes. "How do you feel?" Margaret asked as we descended. "Tired."
Sad.
"Relieved." I paused. "Empty, somehow." It's normal to feel that way after a confrontation like this. You've been living with this stress for months. It'll take time to process everything. Do you think he meant what he said? About wanting to rebuild our relationship? I think he's scared and desperate and facing consequences he never anticipated. Whether that translates to genuine change remains to be seen. We drove home in comfortable silence. As Margaret pulled into my driveway, I saw Emma sitting on my front porch steps, her backpack beside her. "Looks like you have a visitor," Margaret said with a smile. Emma jumped up as I got out of the car, her face anxious. "Grandma, Dad told me about the meeting. Is everything okay?" I pulled her into a hug, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and the lingering innocence of childhood. "Everything's okay, sweetheart. Your father," and I have worked things out. So, I can visit you whenever I want. Whenever you want. And he's not going to try to make you move anymore? No, he's not. Emma's shoulders sagged with relief. I was so scared you were going to disappear from my life forever.
Never.
I'm not going anywhere, Emma. This is my home, and you're always welcome here. We went inside, and I made her favorite snack while she told me about school and her friends and all the normal teenage concerns that had nothing to do with family drama or legal agreements. Grandma? She said as I set the cookies in front of her. Yes, sweetheart. I'm proud of you for standing up to Dad. I know it was hard because you love him. It was very hard. But sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when it hurts. I want to be like you when I'm older, strong and independent and not afraid to stand up for myself. You're already like that, Emma. You stood up for our relationship when it would have been easier to just go along with your parents. That took courage. She smiled, and for a moment, I saw flashes of the woman she would become. Strong, confident, unafraid to make difficult choices. That evening, after Emma had gone home, I sat in my garden as the sun set behind the oak tree Robert had planted for our 10th anniversary. The roses were in full bloom, the vegetable garden was thriving, and the house behind me stood solid and welcoming. This was my home.
My sanctuary.
My choice. 3 weeks later, I was in Rome, standing in the Sistine Chapel with tears running down my face. Michelangelo's masterpiece stretched above me, every brush stroke a testament to human creativity and divine inspiration. I'd done it. I traveled to Italy by myself, navigating airports and train stations and foreign languages with the confidence of a woman half my age. I'd eaten gelato in Florence, toured the Colosseum in Rome, and taken a gondola ride in Venice. I'd proven to myself that my life wasn't over just because I was 72 and alone. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Having fun, Grandma? Can't wait to hear all about your adventures. I smiled and typed back. Having the time of my life. Love you. Another text, this one from Michael. Mom, those pictures you sent are amazing. Dad would be so proud of you. And finally, unexpectedly, one from David. I saw your photos on Emma's phone. Italy looks beautiful. I hope you're having a wonderful time. We'll talk when you get back. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small step toward the possibility of reconciliation. But even if David and I never fully repaired our relationship, I would be okay. I had learned something important over these past months. I didn't need anyone else's permission to live my life. I didn't need to be taken care of or managed or controlled. I was perfectly capable of taking care of myself, making my own decisions, and finding my own happiness. Standing in that chapel, surrounded by art that had endured for centuries, I felt Robert's presence more strongly than I had since the day he died. He was proud of me, I realized. Proud that I'd fought for our home. Proud that I'd stood up for myself. Proud that I was finally living the life I'd always dreamed of. I did it, Robert, I whispered. I'm finally free. And in the echo of those ancient walls, I could almost hear his voice whispering back, I never doubted you would be, my love. I never doubted it for a moment. When I returned from Italy 2 weeks later, David was waiting at the airport. He looked nervous and uncertain, holding a small bouquet of daisies. Welcome home, Mom, he said quietly. I accepted the flowers, touched by the gesture even though I wasn't ready to forgive him completely. Thank you. They're beautiful. I was wondering, would you like to have dinner sometime? Just the two of us? I'd like to hear about your trip. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or ulterior motives. But all I saw was my son, older and humbler than before, genuinely asking for a chance to rebuild what we'd lost. I'd like that, I said finally. But David, if we're going to have a relationship going forward, it has to be built on mutual respect. I'm not your helpless elderly mother who needs to be managed. I'm a capable adult woman who happens to be your parent.
I understand.
And Mom,
I really am sorry. For all of it.
I know you are. But David, being sorry isn't enough. You have to change. You have to do better. I will. I promise I will. Whether he would keep that promise remained to be seen. But as we walked through the airport together, my suitcase rolling behind us and Emma's excited texts lighting up my phone, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Not for a return to the way things were, because that was impossible. Too much had been said and done to go back. But hope for something new, something built on honesty and respect rather than obligation and control. And if it didn't work out, if David couldn't change, or if our relationship couldn't be repaired, I would still be okay. I had my home, my independence, my dreams, and my granddaughter's love. I had proven to myself that I could handle whatever life threw at me. At 72, I was finally free to be myself. And that, I thought as we stepped out into the sunshine of a new day, was worth fighting for. 6 months later, David and I had dinner once a week, slowly rebuilding our relationship on new terms. Emma spent every other weekend with me, helping in the garden and learning to cook. Jessica remained distant but civil, our interactions limited to polite hellos and goodbyes. My house remained mine, filled with memories and love, and the promise of many more years of independence. And on quiet evenings, when the sun set behind Robert's oak tree and the garden bloomed with life, I knew I had made the right choice. Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight with the people we love. But sometimes those battles are necessary to save ourselves and show others who we really are. I was Bella Maris. I was 72 years old. I was nobody's burden and nobody's victim. I was free. Thank you for watching her journey. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more inspiring tales of women finding their strength and independence. Remember, it's never too late to stand up for yourself and live life on your own terms.